Words hold a lot of meaning. Some can be beautiful and help you communicate with the ones you love most. They can also be ugly, scary, obnoxious, calm, gentle, or even brave. But sometimes words lose their adjectivity. They become meaningless, overused, saturated, and they lose their purpose. To describe something or a person, then you need words that reflect what you feel. You may have watched a movie or listened to a song that managed to stir your emotions in such a way that it leaves you confused. So when you try to communicate how you feel, you hit a wall, words become difficult to string together, and you yap for too long until you find the route to take. This happens to me more often than I care to admit. I have gotten better at it, but it took a long time to get here. However, a term that I've seen be used more frequently these days is woke, and at this point, I believe it has lost all its meaning. Woke's definition is the past tense of awake. It also means to be aware of, realize, and be attentive of important societal facts and issues. Some people use this term as an understanding that they may be luckier than others, yet remain aware of people's plight. Others use it as a negative connotation to describe certain art forms, from movies to cartoons to video games, and sometimes they use it to describe people negatively. Now, I'm well aware my channel is not political by any means. Matter of fact, I want to steer clear of politics as much as possible. However, I've seen recently several games that have pushed the narrative so far to one side that I find myself difficult to enjoy what they're trying to make. And I've also seen the community push against this to a point where I find it difficult to resonate with their messaging. So I am stuck in the middle, agreeing with one side and then the next. I'm forced to sit on a fence because I don't want to lie to you and say that Dustborn is a good game because it showcases a diverse crew that brings different perspectives, because it's not. And it doesn't. Quite possibly the worst game because it pushed so far against one side that I can't help but agree with people's opinions of the game. That is just woke propaganda garbage. It also doesn't help that it was created with the taxpayers' money, and the game wasn't even free, which makes it difficult to defend despite the fact it would be considered an indie game because of the size of the team. However, thanks to Dustborn and Forspoken and a company like Sweet Baby Inc., a few communities appeared online and were heavily promoted. The most noteworthy one is Sweet Baby Inc. Detected, led by a Brazilian individual named Cabrutus. This group focuses solely on finding games that they consider woke and let people know of what it contains. I will give credit to them for not review bombing games considering they have over 400,000 members. However, what some of these groups consider to be woke is far too broad to enjoy anything. For the sake of argument, let's say that I am someone who tries to avoid anything that's woke. This means I'm avoiding games like Spider-Man 1 and 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Monster Hunter Wilds, and God of War Ragnarok. And the reason behind it is that it's because it includes diversity, equity, and inclusivity. D.E.I, which also includes LGBT narratives, characters, storylines, or relationships. I find that to be a very silly reason to avoid games. Of course, I'm not ignorant to the fact that many people outside of America don't get promoted with these ideologies. A lot of countries in Asia and Africa don't celebrate Pride Month, and most of them consider that to be illegal. So it's understandable when people who live in those countries want to be informed of games that include that. So for that matter, I understand where they may be coming from. At the same time, having DEI does not ruin a game's storyline or necessarily make a game bad. For an example, The Last of Us Part 2. The main character is a lesbian who dates a bisexual Israeli woman who got pregnant by an Asian man, and the antagonist is a masculine woman who is straight and is in love with a man who has a pregnant wife, and the antagonist is accompanied by someone who is trans throughout most of the game. And the only bad part of the game to me was the unfitting ending. But in terms of gameplay, mechanics, storyline, and music, it's pretty good. Another example would be God of War Ragnarok. The reason they see it as woke is because Angerboda was apparently race swapped, since they say that Norse mythology has no sub-Saharan Africans. I want to point out that no mythology had a Kratos to begin with. In Marvel, Thor is this super jacked handsome deity. Meanwhile, in God of War, he's a drunk blubbering fool. So to whoever version you believe is the true depiction of God of Thunder is based on who you like more. I personally prefer the God of War version. I don't think these groups are a bad thing either. It's your right to want to play whichever game you feel comfortable supporting. I also have to agree on some of the games pushing certain ideologies to a point where the characters don't fit. A perfect example is Dragon Age the Veilguard. Tosh comes off as an obnoxious character because of the writing. I have no cons with the devs or the voice actor. However, for a game that is rooted in fantasy and ogres and monsters, Tosh is the only one that seems out of place. I also want to say that these groups that find DEI as a negative thing also find it a negative to have female combatants being anti-family, being pro-abortion, not having distinct male or female character creation, having a game that showcases mental illnesses like Omori or shutting. And my counter argument for that is the Fallout series. Not only do they include a wide spread of diversity and remain inclusive, but also in New Vegas, if you build a bisexual character, then you do 10% damage to everyone. Now that's just a cool mechanic to have in the game. And there are a lot of games out there that do cool things like that, like Disco Elysium, where you can discover homosexuality. And I had a very interesting conversation with Kim about it. The same people were also mad about a few games before they were even released, like Ghost of Yotai. When a photo of the potential developer team was leaked and people found their social medias, they immediately wrote the game off. Granted, some had very strong opinions on Twitter, which I don't agree with personally, but as I said, I will steer clear of politics as much as possible. However, those opinions, coupled with the fact most of the team was female or they use pronouns in their bio, does not mean the game will be bad. The same thing goes for Intergalactic, a Naughty Dog exclusive for the PlayStation that was written off because the main character is a bald Asian woman. The game looked like it could be decent from what I saw of it so far. If people are mad about it being a Naughty Dog developed game, then sure, your argument may be valid. But if your argument is because it's a sci-fi game where you use a laser sword and cut down robots and the main character isn't a buff man, then I can't really see your point whatsoever. Also, Baldur's Gate 3 is the most diverse and inclusive game I've played. The reason for its success is how good their writing was. And the point of this video isn't to condemn either side of the political sphere, but to illustrate how this argument is futile. DEI should not be the focus on whether you play a game or not. It should be about if the game is good enough to buy. When Hogwarts Legacy came out, people pushed against it so hard that random accounts started going after streamers, despite the fact some of them were donating all the revenue to LGBT charities. However, that game gets repetitive very quickly, and you could easily break the game with powerful spells, which takes away from adding any challenge in parts. But one side of the spectrum was buying 3 or 4 copies of the game because they thought they were making a point. The fact is, the game is boring. I wish people were mad about that more than they were mad about money undeservedly being given to J.K. Rowling. But if you disagree with what I'm saying here, please tell me why. If you believe DEI adds value, then inform me. Educate not only me, but potentially whoever sees this video. If you believe DEI doesn't add value, tell me why as well. For me, I will remain where I stand about video games. If it's good enough and enjoyable, I'll buy it regardless. Like I bought Dustborn for this video. I'm having a fun time making fun of the dialogue. And you should join me over on Twitch so we can both laugh at it. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. Okay, coming to you after the edit. I realized after editing the video, my opinion wasn't entirely clear on the matter. I just want to say that I find it extremely silly to avoid a specific kind of game just because it involves DEI. I enjoy a lot of games that have that, and I do think some games that have DEI or LGBT specific characters or storylines tend to have a little bit more depth. Yes, many of them are poorly presented, but the ones that are actually decent and tell a good story, I think that's worth your time regardless of how you feel about DEI. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. Okay, bye.